welcome to Zero Cool Gaming and today's anime review. Today I'm going to be reviewing, well, an odd anime for me. And it's something that I normally don't watch at all, but, you know, we live in today's world and today's world has some very odd things going on. So, I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Today I'm going to be reviewing a show called Bikini Warrior. But I'm not going to be reviewing it for what the show is. I'm going to be reviewing it for what the show does. Now you might be wondering, what does this show do? Well, to put it simply, it's a parody of RPG games. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you're somebody like me, and you have literally played thousands of RPG games, and you've watched thousands of anime based on RPG settings, fantasy settings. We won't even go with RPG, because they are just fantasy settings. This show, in many ways, makes fun of all of it. But one of the, I guess you could say, topics of subject as of late is the boob armor subject. And this show does a great job of tackling exactly how that functions and how that works in a fantasy setting. In a fantasy world. Ah, yes. The fantasy world where anything is possible, including boob armor that protects people. Why? Because the stats say that it can, and that's all that matters. Does it have bigger numbers than the last stuff you had on? It does? Then it protects you better. Doesn't matter what it looks like. Visually. Visually, the armor could be invisible. Literally. And it would still work better than the last armor you put on. Why? Because the stats say so. That's all that matters. Period. And this show does tackle that quite well, actually, in much the same way. The girls put on their bikini armor, and they're all happy and proud that it's so strong and good. And then they put on actual bikinis, and it's disgusting and revealing, and oh, they shouldn't be wearing this. You see what I'm talking about? Yes, it's a parody. There's no difference between what they were wearing in the swimsuits as far as visually. Absolutely nothing. But because the swimsuits didn't have the stats attached to it, swimsuits are useless. All hell the stats of armor. And in truth, I enjoyed games that would start out the female characters in full plate mail, and then by the end of the game, the most powerful armor for them was a string bikini. Hey, it made sense in game logic, still makes sense today. Why do they do that? Well, I would say that they do that because they're trying to appeal to the male fantasy. Men do not play fantasy role-playing games and think that the women within them are real in any way, shape, or form. Now, I'm sure you can find some left-wing insane nutjob that will claim otherwise, but anybody with half a brain who's being honest and not trying to just simply start trouble knows damn well that the women within these games and entertainment and shows are not real women. Period. There may be real women voicing their characters, but they themselves are a fantasy. And that's all it will ever be. That's all it's intended to be, is a fantasy. I know. Folks over at Twitter can't tell the difference between fantasy and reality, and apparently they can't tell the difference between a cartoon and real life. These people are insane, and they should be ignored. Period. You don't need boob armor to be practical for it to be useful in a video game. Period. You don't need it to be designed like full plate mail for it to be functional in a video game. Period. And you certainly don't need it to be any of that in a cartoon or an anime. It's not real. Period. God, I never thought I would have to say stuff like this to people. I truly never thought that the human beings would become so disingenuous and absolute scumradery that they would sit there and blatantly lie to each other in this way to try to score virtue points with one another because they're so virtuous. Well, if you're so damn virtuous, then you shouldn't be playing the scantily clad game to begin with. You shouldn't be looking at the scantily clad drawn figures at all because you're so perfect and moral. Go run off to your safe space and never look at anything that might offend you again. Stay off the internet. Stay out of my video games. You know, I would love to be able to say that and it actually work. But unfortunately, we live in clown world where these companies think that these insane people should be listened to. No, they shouldn't. And if they become violent in any way, then they should be arrested and imprisoned for the rest of their life as a result. Period. And if they can't handle the world they live in, then they should be ignored. Period. So what is Bikini Warrior? Basically, it is a parody of RPG games and fantasy style anime. It was created to make fun of the boob armor, which in truth is string bikinis with high stats attached to it. That's all it is. You can do anything in a fantasy world. That's what makes it a fantasy. And in truth, I many parts of this show I couldn't stand. I mean, I truly, it's not it's not in my wheelhouse of things that I would normally watch. I'm sure this is supposed to be pure fan service for those who want the fan service. And it's supposed to be a comedy for, I guess, people kind of like me who have played and watched enough of this type of anime. Not this type of anime specifically, but fantasy anime and RPG style video games to catch the jokes within it, because there is a lot of jokes, truly. That's what this show is basically built upon, is the jokes and making fun of the many tropes within RPGs and the mini tropes within anime. And I think they did a good job of that. I think they put way too much fan service into it. I mean, this essentially amounts to softcore porn. If you've ever watched like late night Showtime or late night Cinemax, you've seen something as bad in that respect, or as risque as this show is. They have no actual sex in the show, but boy, do they have everything right up to that line. Yeah, it's wrong. I know that. It's so wrong. But this is what I would call softcore porn. Truly. But at least it's softcore porn that is self-aware of itself and making fun of itself in the process. And I find that hilarious. Anyway, that's my rant for the day, and I hope you enjoy the rest of yours.